Rakeem, I know that you've been watching some shows outside the spring season. So, tell me, like, what's your favorite so far?
Okay, so this is gonna be a toughie between my two favorite. Although I have three shows I may have been watching. My favorite show for outside of spring season I've been watching for almost a year, almost 2 years, has been Dragon Quest: The Adventures of Dai, because it is the anime that feels like home. It is a Saturday morning cartoon in anime form. Because Dragon Quest: The Adventures of Dai was based off an '80s manga and an '80s anime adaptation. This is a readaptation of that anime. It still has some of those older tropes of '80s anime. And those of you who've watched older anime know that there are certain things of how things are written, how things are shown in the '80s that are just so different. It's even hard to explain to people now, like why the feeling is different, how things like the camera angles, the fight scenes, they just approach things in a different way back then. So the reason I like this show so much, I guess, because it's very traditional shown in anime, but it has a good emphasis on like building this small cast and making you feel like really connected to them and their journey. The basic premise is you have this kid named Dai. He's shown in the beginning of the anime to be raised by this group of monsters. He's actually raised by monsters and has a relationship with these monsters. Where in this world, that monsters and humans don't really interact like that. In fact, they're usually enemies. There's this big enemy called Hadler early on, who used to be the lord of the monsters, and he's the one who's kind of driven this wedge and brought war to the land. Over the course of the anime, eventually Dai has his mindset to become a hero, and he gets trained by this great hero named Avon, who was the hero who saved the world from the villain Hadler in the first place. Well, through some certain events, Avon is killed, so to speak, and he is left Dai alone with his other protege Pop, and they go on this journey to allow Dai to become a hero. That's the basic premise of the show. And along the course of the time, over the course of the show, they come in contact with other characters. They fight different protagonists, and it's kind of like it's really cool because it's defeat means friendship. The anime, because basically everyone he comes in contact and fights, he basically befriends all of them. From a gator monster you meet later to a dark swordsman, he has his interactions. He's able to kind of win over different people from this evil army. The fight scenes and the interactions between the fight scenes are really, really good. They're really impactful, and the is really top notch as well. It just feels good to me. I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain. It's just nice to kind of watch the show in the anime. It doesn't have a lot of the modern tropes, like we talked in our last podcast about how does this pervasiveness of perviness throughout modern anime that's kind of inched in. This is kind of in a phase that was a little bit before that was so prominent. So that's not as prominent in this anime. It's a lot more how should I say lighthearted in that sense, but serious in the moments it needs to be. So I've been really enjoying that anime a lot. Now, secondarily, I would say the next anime I've also watched mainline has this anime called World Trigger. And conversely, why I
Mm.
like this anime called World Trigger so much, it was brought up to me by my friend James. He brought it up to me because I had seen this anime multiple times on streaming services. I was like, what is this? What is this? What's going on? My friend James really sold me on the anime to give it a shot, but he told me it was going to be a slow burn. It is a slow burn. The basic premise of World Trigger is that mankind has finally come in contact with people from a different world, like aliens. In this world, they're called neighbors. There's a lot of allegory between like aliens and neighbors, border and border patrol. So it's basically like you're
Oh shit.
it is. You're basically like a border patrol officer that stops aliens from coming into the world and wrecking stuff up. So the protagonist is a very young character who's like new to the organization. And an incident happens where the neighbors come and attack the city he's in, and he tries to stop it. But it's one prevailing thing about the protagonist is he's not very strong. And then eventually he meets another neighbor who is from the other world, but he's not on the same side as neighbors. He's come to his world because of some things that happened in his past. Eventually, what makes this show stand out above a lot of other shows I've watched, even though it's a lot slower early on, is that there's an emphasis on tactics and teamwork like nothing else. The framework for the show is that the border agency that houses the candidates to protect the people from the aliens, they use this hard like technology using the use of these items called triggers. And through the use of these triggers, they're able to put these bodies on that they don't die. They're able to fight continuously, and they're even able to fight with like missing limbs and things like that because their physical bodies are not hurt. These light bodies are like think of almost like a VR body. And then when those bodies use up their energy, they're shot out. They come back. They go back to where they came from. What's cool about the show is that they have this emphasis on like focusing on real tactical like techniques. They use weapons that's like very similar to real world weapons, so it's not a lot of fantasy involved. They use guns, they use swords, they use sniper rifles, cannons, different things
Whatever get
like
the
that.
job done.
Yeah.
Exactly. But in the vein of the show, they're using these concepts, these squads. And the main thing you get from that is it's about complementing each other. These squads of 3 from these different groups. There are multiple squads throughout the show. I mean, dozens of them. And they're led by like a team leader. And there's this emphasis on like balancing your team around like having a person who focuses on long range or having an up close and personal person. And then using their abilities to complement someone else's abilities to take out their opponents.
So a
Eventually,
little
it's
bit like a Black Clover in a sense.
kind of like Black Clover in a sense.
Okay.
Yes. It's kind of like that. But what makes it really good in the middle of the show, the main character who I say is not very strong. He's more of a defensive character. He has a giant shield. And there's a training exercise they go through later on where he is the first one taken out, even though he's the captain of the team. And he has this real introspective moment where he has to feel like, why am I holding my team down? And unlike any other anime where you have a quick training montage, or the guy suddenly gets strong out of nowhere, or he gets an item, someone comes to this man and tells him straight up, you can't get physically stronger in a short amount of time. You can get strong. So he uses his brain. He's like, look, I can't be better or stronger than my teammates. We have a guy who's a melee guy. We have a long range person, but I can complement what they do. And so instead of emphasizing him being overpowered or taking over all the enemies, he's not like that. He can't do that. Instead, he uses what he can do. Like, for instance, he uses an item like a spider web, like a grappling hook, that allows his faster teammate to bounce off the grappling hook and move all around the arena or something like that. He's able to call shots and line up things better because he sees a better perspective of the whole battlefield. He studies patterns. He looks at the long game. He's like the tactician, the coach of the team to a degree while he's out there. He focused on what he was good at. Yeah.
So what you're saying is he ain't no Goku knockoff.
No, he's not a Goku knockoff, and I love it. Not every protagonist needs to be someone who can just one shot everything. I mean, that's tough place for that. One Punch Man is amazing, but I like the protagonist who's vulnerable to a degree. Who has to rely on his teammates and like actually use his team, and they actually work together to complete a goal. That's why I'm enjoying World Trigger. Now, the last show I've been watching, many of you probably know, I've been watching Ranking of Kings. I think Ranking of Kings, although Dragon Quest Adventures Die is probably my favorite show I've been watching it much longer. Ranking of Kings for this first season, and I don't even know if it's going to have a second season, this first season is amazing. It does so much in the short amount of time it has in like 23, 24 episodes. So basically, Ranking of Kings revolves around this character named Boji, who is dumb and deaf. He cannot speak and he cannot hear. He's able to read lips, but people around him do not know he's able to read lips. So he's in this world where people make fun of him for his disability. Even though he's a prince and he's royalty, they look down on him as someone who's unworthy of the title he's holding. He comes in contact with this character named Kage, who's like this shadow creature who robs him and steals his clothes. But Boji is so he's such an endearing character because he's so young and so innocent. You just can't help but root for him. Like you want him to succeed, you want him to be safe. And he's the type of guy who, even though he got robbed of his clothes, he's a prince. So this guy who robbed him, he came back, kept bringing him more clothes. He kept bringing him more clothes. He kept bringing him more. Every day, he's got more and more clothes. As a thing, he just layers on top of himself like multiple parts of clothes to give the Kage. And that's he's so good, so innocent. He'll turn people who are cold-hearted or monsters, to on his side because they can't, you can't hate this kid. He's too nice. But what's great about this show is that I can't tell you all the details because literally all the early stuff in this show will spoil you if you've seen it already. If you go episode 3, 4, 5. Yeah. So basic premise, let's just say it has a little bit of Game of Thrones to it, where there's a lot of espionage within the kingdom. There's twists and turns. There's some supernatural elements to it. And then there's some traditional shonen stuff in there too. So it's a nice combination of almost like a Studio Ghibli vibe with the graphics and the lightheartedness, and then a combination of Game of Thrones with kind of some of the viciousness of the scenes and political intrigue behind it. And there's some supernatural elements that will all combine into this nice dish, and it's just great for what it is. I'm really enjoying Ranking of Kings. I recommend it to anybody who's watching out there. So my 3 shows: World Trigger, Dragon Quest Adventures Die, and Ranking of Kings. Those are the animes I'm keeping up with right now.
So it's interesting when you bring up Dragon Quest and you were like, it feels like home. It is sometimes people don't give enough credit to shows that can execute existing tropes, or like old school tropes in this case. They can execute existing tropes at a very high level, because just because you're doing those tropes doesn't mean you're doing a good job of doing those tropes.
Amen.
There are so many shows, and that's what people miss about. And I mean, like, I don't mean to bring this show up because I'm like a huge fan of it, but this is what this show does right, and that's why it's so popular. That's what people miss about My Hero Academia. My Hero Academia, like, they're like, oh, it's the same as every other show. Yeah, it is. It is the same as a lot of other shonen, but like, it executes all the shonen tropes at a super high level. It's doing it better than most shows can do it. And Dragon Quest does like that 90s anime vibe, that 90s action anime better than most shows did it back then. And like, definitely most shows that would try to do it now would probably miss the point. But fortunately, it has that source material that it can work off of and kind of center it a little bit, as opposed to like, if you were trying to work off of, like, oh, this is the vibe that I felt when I was a kid, like, that's going to be a lot harder to do.